Okay, thank you. Very good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Legislator Compensation. This was a subcommittee. There were two that were put forth by Management Council. I do see all of our members, two in the room. I have Co-Chairman Baldwin with me in the room, and then I see our four other members online, and then a guest legislator as well. So we will dispense with the roll call and continue. First, I don't know we'll dispense with the roll call. Call everyone present for the purposes of the meeting, and unless there's an objection. Is there anything we need to know before we get started from our staff? Heather, Katie, any housekeeping? Besides the roll call, which we dispense with, all are present. All right, thank you. So we have 5 bill drafts before us today, folks, and we're just going to walk right through them. First, get a quick overview from Director Obrecht, who is with us today. We have many of our staff, including the Senate Chief Clerk here. Welcome. And we'll just walk through these things very briefly. For our staff that's monitoring, please let me know remind me before the end of each bill that we take any public comment that may be online. We'll ask in the room too, but just in case somebody dials in online. So with that, Director Obrecht, let's just get started with our first bill draft, which is 228, Legislator per diem. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's right. First bill draft today is Legislator per diem 23 LSO 228, working draft 0.3. This bill draft increases the per diem paid to legislators from $109 as it currently stands to $155, which is the amount set by the United States General Services Administration, for the per diem for federal employees for most of the state of Wyoming. It also provides that the amount shall be adjusted annually as of July 1 by the state auditor to that amount set by the US GSA yearly. Section 2 of the bill appropriates $150,000 from the general fund to LSO to cover the increased cost in legislator per diem for the remainder of the biennium. It also appropriates $50,000 from the general fund to the state auditor's office for the purpose of supplementing per diem provided to any state board, commission, council, or authority or other entity whose rate of per diem is statutorily tied to the rate paid to legislators. And subsection C of section 2 states that any board or commission that isn't generally funded is authorized to use their funds or any funds available to them to make up the difference in the per diem authorized for the remainder of the biennium. Mr. Chairman, the only other thing I'd like to point out is the spreadsheet that LSO prepared with the other boards and commissions that are statutorily tied in to legislator per diem. And I think there's 53 that we identified. There's a blanket provision in Title 33 that says, unless otherwise provided, all boards and commissions under Title 33 shall be provided legislator per diem for any service on that board or commission.
All right, very straightforward, thank you. So I just want to clarify that the appropriations are basically for the last half of this current fiscal biennium. Is that correct? I mean, what I guess I'm seeing by the effective date and by the reversion date is January 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2024. So none of this would take place within the next or it would be over a year before this takes place, and we're only actually budgeting with this Section 2 for that 6-month period. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, that is accurate.
All right, thank you. Any members of the committee have any questions for Director Obrecht? I'm looking at Representative Conley. I see a hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Conley.
Speaker. I have a clarifying question in terms of our subcommittee. Are we making a recommendation to the full management council, or do bills that we pass go straight to the legislature, or is it expected that there would be an individual level sponsor?
So at least it's my understanding that any recommendations that come out of this committee will go to management council, and President Dockstader is expecting, or is on that same page as well. So we think we have at least one more meeting and maybe a second one in the works for any bill drafts that may come out of this meeting. To that point, thank you, Representative Conley. If we have, bill drafts that are come out of this committee, if they're very little, I mean, if we feel comfortable, we can forward them out of this meeting. If we don't, we can certainly have a subsequent meeting and consider any work that needs to be done. So thank you for that question. Any follow-up, Representative Conley?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to say, to me, this is the one that really is a no-brainer. We've heard from our own about the difficulty in securing lodging during the interim for the current per diem, but also this impacts so many others who volunteer their labor for our important boards and commissions. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anyone else on the committee members online? No committee members online? All right, thank you. So I guess I have two questions. One, to be clear, the constitutional prohibition against changing salaries and mileage within the term obviously does not apply to that. Is this accurate, Mr. Obrecht?
Mr. Chairman, that is accurate. This is not salary. It is simply reimbursement for your expenses as a required part of serving in the legislature.
All right, thank you. The second part is, do we feel like, it seems like the 150 for 6 months worth of additional per diem seems very high for a spring per diem or a spring half of the year. The other one actually seems very low when we look at the list of agencies. So are we, 150 is probably ample. Is the section B with 50 sufficient based on the number of commissions and boards we may be impacting with this bill draft? Mr. Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, as to the first part, the 150,000 to LSO, I do think that could be reduced. Heather will have a good number on that for that 6-month period, but I don't know that we need anywhere near that much. As to the 50,000 to the boards and commissions, we checked with LSO Budget Fiscal, and based on the fiscal note for this bill last year, they are comfortable still that is enough to provide that for that 6-month period.
All right, thank you very much. Anything to be added from Heather or anybody? Now we've got Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did just have one question I thought of while you were talking, and that is, have we considered that we're paying lodging tax as the legislature? Is there any opportunity for us to be tax exempt on that, like our school districts are when they travel where we are? So one of the other documents you provided us, as far as if we were to compensate an employee on our behalf, we are considered a public officer, as you were telling us in that one document. So as that capacity plays out, is there any ability to exempt ourselves from the lodging tax to try to give some relief in that way? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Steinmetz. Director Obrecht, do you want to take a shot at it?
Mr. Chairman, I will. I think that when you register as a state legislator, you are tax exempt. State employees are tax exempt from Wyoming sales tax for lodging. And it was my understanding that legislators were too. We'll look into that more and can present it to Management Council.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. So we will examine that a little further to see how it is being handled by, particularly, I suppose, the hoteliers of the state. But thank you. All right, any further questions from our committee? Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee on LSO 228, working draft point 3?
Move the bill.
There was a motion on the bill. I believe it was Senator Guru.
Second.
Second, Representative Brown. Thank you. Discussion on the bill? Or any, let's just walk through amendments. Any amendments? Page 1, there's not much there. Page 2. Page 2, page 3. Amendments to page 3. Discussion on the bill? Discussion on the bill.
Question.
Any public comment online? Any public comment in the room? I'm going to go back to the committee one last time. Any comment from the committee? All right, seeing none, we're going to vote on, this will be the request, or this will be a motion. This motion is to move the bill for presentation to Management Council as drafted. And I think we'll just go ahead and take a roll call vote. So if Heather, would you please call the roll? 228.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Baldwin,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Barlow.
Aye. Thank you.
6 ayes.
Thank you. That bill has passed for presentation to Management Council. Next bill for our consideration.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Sorry to
Director
interrupt. There are 2 other items under legislator per diem that aren't bill draft related that we could discuss
Please
at
proceed.
this point in time. The first is the memo we provided on potential catered lunch services. And Operations Administrator Tanya Heitrick can walk you through this memo.
So let's just, for Katie or Heather, when did this email come out, just in case, so all of our members are on the same page? We have, okay, this email came out just this morning, about 8 o'clock, and it has several different, there's a new email, several different things. So these are salary type things. It has nothing to do with what we're coming up with next. So there was a memo on that as well. When did that come out? Just so everybody has it. Been last week with the meeting materials. All right, thank you. Ms. Heitrick, good morning, welcome.
Thank you,
Please
Mr.
proceed.
Chairman. Yes, we prepared a memo September 29th, 2022. I think it was sent out last Thursday, if memory serves me correctly. I think there were a number of additional items. With that, if you recall at your last meeting, you requested our staff investigate the possibility of providing catered lunches to the members of the Wyoming Legislature, both in the Senate and the House. And we were actually already in conversations with Graffiti Cuisine, who is a business here in Cheyenne that provides that service in response to efforts that we had undertaken in relation to our recruitment and retention efforts for LSO staff. And so through those conversations, what we were investigating for our staff was providing lunch through the sessions, so 40 days. And the price that she quoted us, she authorized to provide to the legislature as well, and that's $9.05 per meal. That would include the cost of, setting up the lunch service, serving the meals, the food, and then tearing it down as well. She identified 3 options, so options A, B, and C are noted in the memo. Option A and B are obviously a little bit less intensive and less expensive, and then option C is sort of the hot lunch, if you will. For $9.05, that would be option A, 2 days a week, and then option B, 2 days a week, and option C, 1 day a week. And I think we did have the total cost in this. And I think it was approximately $30,000, but I'll need to check on that, Mr. Chairman. This is a revised copy of the memo.
Thank you, Ms. Heitrich. So and we'll double check on the number, but the 30,000 was just for, or not just, but for LSO staff. Is that accurate, or is that LSO staff and legislature?
Mr. President, if you'll give me just one moment, I'll get you that figure.
Thank you.
But
Go ahead, Director Obrecht.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. The caterer is comfortable and believes she can provide meal service for up to 170.
Yes, we investigated providing service to up to 170, which would be all of the session staff, highway patrol, our staff, interns. And we think that that number is actually fairly high. But for purposes of just the legislators, it's $33,666. $9 a meal times 93 people for 40 days.
I just want to clarify, the 33,660 was legislator. Is that accurate, Ms. Heitrich?
Yes, 93 members. It doesn't include anyone else, so.
93 members, that's right. The 67th legislature will
That's
have
right.
93 members. Let's get used to saying that out loud. All right, anything else, Ms. Heitrich? Yes, Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, it's also, this would be 3 serving lines. So they would probably utilize the catering kitchen in the extension for prep, but then actually serve in the House and Senate break rooms, and then also in the LSO main break room in the garden level as well.
Okay, thank you.
And it would not negate the need for break room attendant. We did discuss that briefly this morning. And I think for 170 people through the general session, it would be $61,540. And that does not include tax. So we would have to leverage our tax exemption status, to Senator Steinmetz's point. And it also does not include gratuity, which is an additional minimum 10%.
All right, thank you. Director Obrecht, please.
Mr. Chairman, the caterer is also willing and able with advance notice to provide meals for dietary or allergy restrictions as well. And the last thing I think I have to mention on this caterer can also provide meals during the JAC budget hearings, and that would be a good test run. I think that's about 24 meals a day usually.
Okay, thank you. All right, committee, do you have any questions for Ms. Heitrich or Director Obrecht? And then we have our Senate Chief Clerk here, and I know they have often had meals, so I'll give her the opportunity if she wants to make any comment to this issue. But any of our committee members? Committee members, any questions? Committee members, any questions? Seeing none on the screen. Chief Clerk, you certainly don't have to make any comment, but you are here, and so I know you've dealt with this issue during your tenure, continuing tenure. So, Chief Clerk, it's great to see you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chief Clerk and Bottle Washer of the Senate. We welcome this proposal. We think it would take a lot of pressure off the session staff to have to be concerned about providing the meals, and It certainly is a convenience. We understand our members need to grab a quick lunch and resume their work. So we think the convenience of it, as well as for staff when we work long hours, and as you do, it's difficult to prepare and bring in a meal for yourself for the next day. So we would definitely encourage this look at an outside caterer to provide meals for everyone. We have in the past been asked to provide meals for interns, and we haven't always been able to do that, and for the Highway Patrol. So the fact that this is inclusive of everyone, I think is a great idea.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief Clerk? I have several senators online. Senator Guru, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, it's not a question maybe for, well, it might be a question for the Chief Clerk. I don't know how much she's delved into this. Madam Clerk, good morning. I thought I was the bottle washer. I knew you were Chief Clerk, but I thought I was. We'll let that one go for a second. But I wanted to ask, I'm in for the staff, and that I think it's very important that they get a chance to get a hot meal. I know we're going at kind of breakneck speed, so during the session, so I think that part's fine. But when it comes to the members themselves, I know that many groups and associations offer us lunch on most days. So my question is, and I don't know if anybody on the staff can answer it, if you talk to the caterer about opting in, opting out, are they going to need to know from the beginning? Is it an all or nothing, or could a member say, "Hey, I'll do I'll do 20 days," or do you either sign in for the whole shot or not for the whole shot? I guess that'd be my question. If any of that was discussed. Just to kind of get a feel for that, because I think some members would say, no, I'll just kind of go off on my own and maybe go to the free lunch every now and again or not. But just a little discussion on that, if that was discussed at all.
Thank you, Senator. And I don't know if there are such a thing as a free lunch, but we'll get to that. Ms. Heitrick, we approach the dais, so please.
Mr. President, Senator Gru, we did discuss that with the graffiti cuisine, and it is sort of an all or nothing approach. I mean, a member could choose not to participate, but the caterer does need advance notice. She actually requested a decision by November 1st because this is such a large group to serve and such a large financial obligation for her as well. She thought she could accommodate, 3 to 5 additional meals, but to your point, not every day sort of making a choice whether you're going to participate in the meal service or not.
Thank you. I see Senator Steinmetz's hand. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that was the decision by November 1st also kind of plays into what I had to ask, because traditionally, I think we've made this decision as the Senate on our own, and we've had our own caterer and done some things like that at a substantially reduced rate than what we're looking at here. I think that figuring it out and doing some napkin math and visiting with some folks, I think it was costing us like $5.09 or something like that per day for all of our lunch, our snacks, everything. And then I think that the staff was then paid through the LSO account, but we're putting the food budget on their own dime, and then we paid them at the end of session, which we absolutely have got to remedy no matter how we go forward on this, because they shouldn't be carrying that burden for us. But I guess to me, it's a pretty substantial increase in how much we're paying, one, and number two, then how will the decision be made? Because we've normally made that decision on our own as separate bodies. And so I'm not sure that I'm willing to say that our body would be comfortable. I don't know what my other senators think about delegating that then to management council when we've kind of done that on our own in our own chambers. So just some other questions to think about. And I'm not sure how we would do that, where our caucus meeting isn't until the 19th, where we could actually discuss it and get people together. So just some thoughts there, if you have any insight.
Thank you. So I think maybe we should segregate this discussion just a little bit, and let's keep the staff, both our permanent staff and our session staff, separate and talk about that as one entity. And then the legislative, to Senator Steinmetz's point about the legislators, whether it's of each body in a different, maybe different part of the discussion, because there may be different decision points have to be reached for our staff if we're making this part of our truly our compensation and retention type program. So Ms. Heitrick, please.
In response to that question, Senator Steinmetz, we did investigate the possibility of bifurcating payment, paying for the labor cost associated with the meal through a professional services contract, and then passing on the cost of only the food to our staff. And that was a much reduced figure, and I don't have that before me as far as the total goes, but I know that it was approximately $3.50 for our staff for each meal. So that's an option as well that we investigated. You know, here at LSO, we typically historically have provided meals, and people can buy into those meals that staff bring for $3 a day. And so we wanted to find something that was comparable to alleviate some of the burden. And to your point, Mr. Speaker, it was in response to the 2021 recruitment and retention work that LSO did for our staff.
Okay, thank you. Chief Clerk, you had some comment?
I think when we found out about this, Mr. Chairman, we were not aware that this effort was going on until just last week when we started our planning session. But I had instructed my staff supervisor, Judy Parks, to investigate outside catering for this upcoming session as well. So I find it interesting that we were both on the same track. A lot changed during COVID, unfortunately. We found a lot of the catering businesses in Cheyenne either went out of business or were not able to sustain their business. A lot of people left the food service industry. So there was a lot of turmoil as a result of COVID that impacted this area of our business as well. Food costs have gone up. We talked about the cost of what we were paying, which was roughly $5 a day for food costs. But if you consider the labor, you would add another probably $20,000 per session that we weren't asking our staff and members to recoup. We were just looking at the food costs. So there's a little disparity there we knew outside catering was going to cost more than what we were able to do ourselves with this subsidized labor. So we were going to come up with a proposal. Well, we were hoping to come up with a supplier first of all, and then found out about what LSO had been doing. But we were going to look at an opt-in or opt-out and have it be one way for each person that we were planning to bring in meals for. And we would need to know that ahead of session, obviously.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. With that, does anybody have any further questions on the proposal or on the information? And then we'll decide if we want to advance a proposal to Management Council. And I do think it is appropriate for this meeting to just at least make a recommendation to Management Council, particularly on the staff side of it. I do think that I and whoever else would like to, and there's other folks on Management Council, of course, on this committee, we can take this forward and at least provide the information to Management Council, and they can make a recommendation. And to Senator Steinmetz's point about caucus, et cetera, even though that it's for a subsequent legislature, the planning and many things still have to take place with the current legislature, and including the hiring of staff and contracts and things. So I think it is appropriate that we at least advance the staff one forward if this committee so chooses for consideration by Management Council. So any further questions from the committee members? Any further discussion or questions? Discussion or questions?
Mr. President, I would offer
Yes,
one
Ms.
additional
Tytrek.
comment. The pricing offered with the bifurcated labor and food service, she did offer that it's scalable. So in the event you wanted to execute a professional services contract for the House and the Senate, that's an option as well. And the price, the total for LSO is $18,100. That includes food and labor. The food cost that would be passed on to our staff potentially would be $7,000. Of course, that's $3.50 a meal. And then the labor professional services contract would be $12,000.
Okay, there was a lot of numbers there. We'll get a summary of that later in writing. All right, so committee, any further questions from the committee? Any public comment on this? I'm sorry, Senator Guru, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question back. Okay, so previously, staff meals were prepared by, at least on the Senate side, let's talk about that because that's where I've been. Prepared by the folks who provided those meals, and then they paid for the meals, or were they just provided the meals? I'm sorry, I missed that there during that discussion.
Okay, so I want to be clear, Senator Guru, that you are asking specifically about the meal preparation that took place in the Senate, and those non-legislators who received those meals, and I assume that is mostly session staff, did they reimburse for those meals, or was that covered by in some other means? Chief Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, each staff person was assessed an expense for courtesy fund at the end of session, just like senators were. The only difference is the members were also assessed for some minor things to do with leadership gifts and things that were member-only purchases. But staff also received a courtesy fund assessment at the end of session, the same, and they paid the same for the meals as the members did.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
hopefully that clarifies the questions, both, and that was just for session staff. That was not for regular or permanent staff. I think what I understood Ms. Hytrek saying about permanent staff is they actually have a rotating schedule preparing meals, and everybody either pitches in or pays in or whatever. But that is obviously being done not by a caterer, but by themselves and supporting each other throughout each work day. On the House side, just as a summary, it's actually changed a little bit over the last couple of years. We've never had a caterer per se. We've had someone in the kitchen or two different people rotating through the day. Things available. We have a courtesy fund. This last year, there was one of our members, Representative Duncan, coordinated with many of the generous donors who provide lunches anyway, and those were brought into the break room and provided to members instead of being distributed around the community or in the rooms downstairs. They were brought into this House break room. So anyway, I think maybe have we clarified it? Is there any further questions about kind of what's been provided in the past? And then I think I'd like to differentiate these as two proposals. I think the first proposal that I'd like us to either take action or not on is whether to advance a recommendation to Management Council to provide continue to look for and provide options for staff, both session and permanent staff, to provide them meals during the sessions. And I think we ought to extend that actually to the JAC work as well. And if we can tie this into one contract, that would be helpful, I think. So any discussion on that, on a proposal to support our staffs through a meal type of approach? I see Representative Conley first, then Senator
Thank you,
Giroux.
Mr. Chair. And, I'm an absolute yes on this one. We received a report from LSO regarding kind of recruitment and retention of staff. And it's a problem. It's a problem right now. And when I think in particular about LSO staff and sessions staff, that what we expect of them on a typical day, it's often where lunch out in the community you'd be hard pressed to be able to get lunch out in the community. When we now in the House are having meetings at lunchtime every day, it means that, for example, committee secretaries would need to be available from about 11 and probably through 2:30, right, in order to do the work that we need and expect of them right during the entire lunch hour. I think it only makes sense that we do provide lunch for them, and I'd like to do it without cost to them, to be honest. So that's my 2 cents on that portion.
Thank you, Senator Giroux.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I would agree. It does. It goes back to what we were talking about, with salary discussions and all that. To me, too, it's about the culture of the institution, and I think this is a small way that we can actually get a big bang for our buck with our staff. Because I wish, frankly, as a person that's in the business, I wish all around the Capitol were dotted nice little restaurants and places where people could just duck out and go, but that's just not the case. And with our limited time schedule, the staff is put under enormous pressure. So, and we'll get to the members in a minute, but the staff is put under enough pressure as it is. And I think, never let it be said we didn't do the least we could do. And I think the least we can do in this situation is to provide meals for our staff. And I agree too. I think we should pay for the whole shop.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion from the committee? Further discussion for the committee. So we are on that part, I guess. The consideration is for providing meals for the staff. Further discussion from the committee? Is there any public comment? Any follow-up, Ms. Heitreck, Chief Clerk, Director Obrecht? All right, seeing none, committee. I guess this is not probably a formal motion, or what should we do here, Director? Should we have a motion to advance a proposal to Management Council, or should we just say it's by consensus? Do you have a suggestion? Since this is not a bill draft or something like this, it just is a policy recommendation.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I think that's right. It's just a policy recommendation. And actually, to Senator Steinmetz's point, I don't think even Management Council probably wants to, outside of staff, decide on this issue for the bodies either. So just by consensus, discuss this at the next Management Council meeting.
All right, so let's just do a hand. All those in favor of this being advanced out of this committee for consideration by Management Council with a favorable recommendation to provide meals for our session and permanent staff during the session and during JAC, just show me your hands on the screen. All right. So I have 6 in favor. Thank you very much. So that'll be the first one. I seem to get a sense from the discussion earlier that the discussion about what the bodies would do individually, i.e. the members of the House and the members of the Senate, should be left a little bit for those folks to visit about. Is there anyone disagree with that assessment? And that should be something that the subsequent leadership and the bodies take up. I see no. I see Senator Giroux, please.
Yeah, only thing I was wondering is that maybe if we went back to the caterer and just asked them if they could maybe hold off just 10 days on that opt-in, opt-out decision, then that would get to Senator Steinmetz's question. I think that might sneak in the caucus in there. I can't remember that. But anyway, just whatever the dates are to say, give us until our caucus is finished so people can see the proposal, and then I would assume then at that point they could opt in, opt out, and then make their own decision. Or if they wanted to change everything as a group, they could, I guess.
Okay,
Is that-
thank you. So it looks to me that in reading the room, that we'll make that request of the caterer, if they'll give us a little more time. I think when Management Council makes this decision, which I hope will be in 10 days, or I can't remember exactly the meeting day, but it's not too far away, within 2 weeks. That will be before November 1st, if they Management Council chooses to take up the issue or to decide on the issue. And then we can lock down that part of it, hopefully. If it's, and then the second part of it will be actually an add-on. If Management Council goes with the staff option, the legislators would be an add-on. And actually, to that point, it doesn't have to be house by house. Maybe it could be member by member. And some members may say we want in, and some members may say we don't. And then there's, anyway. All right, I have Representative Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one other thing to keep in mind, that the House changed its meeting schedules for the last session. And it meant that virtually every member, I think, was having a meeting at the lunch hour, where that wasn't the case in the past. And that's just something to keep in mind as we go forward with thinking about this issue, about what the daily schedule will look like. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And the minority floor is correct. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of the last two sessions, there were committee meetings, 2 committee meetings at least every day. And I say at least because JAC would sometimes meet, and sometimes Judiciary would meet if they needed it. So the House certainly is utilizing the noon hour to the fullest extent that our members are available. All right, any further discussion on this memo or on this catered lunch service? Any other further discussion? All right, thank you very much for that. Are we on, is there another memo you want to go through now, Director? All right, please proceed. The room rates.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, that's right. We investigated room rates during a legislative session, and Anthony Serra did this research, and he can present the memo.
All right, so this is another memo. This is dated September 28th, 2022. Mr. Serra, thank you. Welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So at your last meeting, you asked us to look into group rates, a possible RFP for hotel rates during the legislative session. So we compiled some information. Ashley, our new legislative editor, assisted with this as well. Really what we found through informal conversations with the entities we listed here, we just kind of started informal conversations with a variety of hotel facilities in Cheyenne. And really what we found is about $100 a night. And really that's the government rate for the vast majority of them that we contacted, that they would offer legislators during the legislative session. Through our informal conversations with them, we didn't really get the sense that going out for an RFP would garner any better rates for members at this point in time. We also had some conversations with state procurement about an RFP. Really, they don't have any experience, anything to compare it to at this point, with the exception of large events that, say, the Department of Health, for example, has put on, which really doesn't compare to this. So that's really what we found in our research. It would likely continue to be right around that $100 a night mark, which is very comparable to the government rate that I think most of you already can receive today. Just for comparison, we also do, we do block rooms for your interim committee meetings already, and we are doing that. And what I'll say is again, they're usually the government rate around $100 a night, and the vast majority of members do not take advantage of that. And I don't know if it's that they just aren't they just aren't aware that we're doing that for them, although we do communicate what hotel, or if they just have, I think most members have a strong preference of where they like to stay, and, for a variety of reasons. So unless it's in a community with very limited lodging, typically you only have 1 to 3 members in an interim committee meeting taking advantage of that 14 room block. So I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Sarah? Obviously, this isn't exhaustive of all the hotels. This is
Correct.
ones they were familiar people stay at. And, so any questions from the committee? Mr. Sarah, questions for Mr. Sarah? Okay, Ms. Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered if you ever do any, and I don't want to add more workload to your, but the reason some of us don't stay at the block of hotels, or the reason I don't sometimes, is because I go on Travelocity or hotels.com or whatever, and you can sometimes get a deal that's better than what the block of rooms is or the government rate at hotels. And so that's why I think some of us do that at times, but I didn't know if we ever compare that and make sure that the rate we're getting from the hotel, the block of rooms, is comparable to what we can get on those discount sites. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I guess I'm just going to maybe just interject a little bit here. So what the staff is doing is just as a courtesy for members who may be traveling into an area where there is very tight booking. If you're going into the summer into the Northwest or Teton County or whatever, sometimes it's just an availability issue. I don't know that they're actually going out and searching the sites. They're calling directly the provider and seeing what is available at the desk. And I'm not saying that couldn't go to those other things, but that's more time that our staff puts. So it's strictly an assistance, not a trying to find the best deal. Anything to add, Mr. Sarah?
No, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I would add is we are not doing room blocks for Cheyenne and Casper meetings just because of the, lodging and the wide variety of facilities that are available in those communities, and legislators obviously have their preference in those larger communities. So as you said, we really only do it for communities, smaller communities.
And to Senator, thank you. And to Senator Steinmetz's point, often the government rate, even at the desk, is not the cheapest rate. If you have some other cards or discounts or things available to you, sometimes there are better deals. So I agree that sometimes it is, there's other options. All right, any further discussion on this memo or any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, just on a related topic.
Please, Director.
Josh Anderson, Senior LSO Staff Attorney who staffs the Revenue Committee, sent me an email in response to a previous question about lodging tax for legislators. And according to some Department of Revenue guidance issued within the last few years, it's an issue of who pays. If a government agency pays with their government card for the room, then that is not taxable. But if it's a government employee who pays with a private credit card and is later reimbursed for that expense, that is a taxable event. So it would probably require legislation to exempt whoever the legislature would want to exempt from that taxing event.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'm sorry you're listening into our meeting. I'm thankful, but I'm still sorry. Mr. Sarah, thank you very much. Any further questions from the committee? Further questions from the committee on this issue? I don't see any strong urge to take any action on this, nor that I do know what action would be taken. And it sounds like the lodging tax issue, that might be something that we need a little harder look at if someone wanted to bring a bill to alter that issue. All right, anything further on this particular topic or with this particular research, Director Obrecht? All right, we'll proceed on. Committee, no objection, we'll proceed on to our next draft, which is Legislator Constituent Service Allowance. And I think actually we're going to tie 31 and 30 together. They're both similar, or close to the same part of statute. One is just an area component. Would that be an accurate, the larger area component, the large district issue. Is it 30?
Yep,
Is that
Mr. Chairman,
accurate,
you're right.
Director?
Yep.
Okay, that accurate. So I think, so members, we have, we'll take the two bills. We'll first do the first one. This is just a straight up, do we want to change it? And the second one is the large district one, and we'll do those two, 231 and then 230 in that order. Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, currently, members of the legislature are provided $750 a quarter for constituent service allowance. There is no hard guideline or requirements in statute or LSO policy or any policy or rule of the legislature on how that money can be expended. It's simply to help defray the cost of serving your constituency. LSO 2231 Working Draft 2 is simply a placeholder and doesn't include a dollar amount on what that constituent service allowance could be increased to. And really what this is in response to is the subcommittee's discussion on potentially utilizing personal staff to help with different functions of your service. And the idea being that your constituent service allowance could be used to defray those costs. We've included a rundown of what other states provide to their members and constituent service allowance compiled by NCSL, and also a memo from Legislative Counsel Tamara Reveille on the potential taxing consequences to legislators of using constituent service allowance or actually any funds to hire their own personal staff. And Tamara can walk you through both of those documents.
All right, committee, I think maybe let's just get a sense from the committee right now. Is there an interest in adjusting or having a discussion about adjusting the constituent service allowance, which is currently at $750? Let's just have a general, just a brief discussion. I see Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I would like to have the discussion, and I'd like us to talk about the potential for increasing. And I had some fun going through what other states do, and let's face it, it's all over the place, from about a dozen, a little bit more, that there's zero, to some where it's tens of thousands of dollars for what we would call the equivalent of a CSA. So I really think that we're on our own in terms of thinking about what's best for us in Wyoming. And for me, one of the things I used to do and did again this year is, after session, send out a letter to every household in my district. It was a summary of what we did, what was expected during the interim. And let's face it, our constituent service allowance doesn't cover the cost of sending out a letter to each of our constituents. And I would hope that we all do that and more. And so I would like to have the discussion, because I do think it's important for us to reach our constituents in the best way for them, not simply for us. And for example, a letter is one of those ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion, any of the committee members? We'll proceed. I just want to make sure there's a sense that we want to talk about numbers and what we want to do with it. I see Representative Brown's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate what the good minority floor leader is saying. And then I think this kind of begs a larger question. And personally, I think it begs a larger question with everything that we're actually discussing here, is what are we expecting out of our legislators? At the end of the day, we're citizen legislators, but we have taken on a far larger role in the very, I would say the past 10 years. The role of legislator has dramatically changed. And I think this piecemealing that we're doing right now is kind of a symptom of what we actually are trying to attack, is what are we actually going to do with this legislature? Do we expect this legislature to become more of a professional legislature, or do we expect this to be a citizen legislature that works? I did the math on the amount of committee meetings that I've done over the past year, and it was an additional month of time away from my job. So you add that on top of doing everything else. When you start adding that, plus your constituent services, meeting people for coffees, sending out letters, doing those types of things, it's a completely different realm. And so when I start talking about piecemealing and hey, we want to change the legislator per diem, hey, we want to change the constituent service, I think it begs a larger question. And I don't know that maybe this committee is ready to attack that, but I honestly do think that it's a larger question that we should be discussing as a whole, is what are we expecting out of this legislature and these individual legislators, and whether or not we want them to have a mailing service. As we saw in some of the other NCSL briefing that we got, that there's a lot of places that have the ability to send out mailings, and they have $13,000 a year to do mailings or whatever that case may be. So I know I rambled a little bit there, but excuse me, I do think that it begs the larger question when we're talking about all of these different bill drafts, what it is that we actually expect out of our individual legislators, and whether or not what we're attempting to fix here is truly the end all be all, or if we're still trying to piecemeal the issue together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Brown. So I think you bring up several good points, and Management Council and current leadership have been examining this for several years. During my 4 years on Management Council, you can just take a look at the number of committees we have now compared to 20 years ago, the number of committee meeting dates we have now compared to 20 years ago, the number of bill drafts that we have, both committee bills, particularly committee bills that we have, and there is we'll see a significant upward trend across that. I don't have to tell anything to my Senate colleagues about the number of meeting dates, because, well, House members, we get to spread ourselves out quite a bit thinner than our Senate colleagues do. So yes, I agree with you. There is a larger discussion to be had. That's for the 67th, probably, and what we'll do is make some recommendations to go forth to Management Council to at least help us with the current understanding of our service, maybe help the next legislature fulfill their service duties, not better, but more in another way. How's that? Maybe with some more support. All right. Any further discussion from the committee? Discussion from the committee. I see Tamara on Mr. Reveille on the line. Do you want to add anything to any of this discussion, Ms. Reveille?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to walk through some information on what other states do and some information on what the tax consequences of using constituent allowance to assist with staffing needs and office kinds of needs, but I will defer to you and the committee whether that walkthrough is warranted at this time.
All right, I think so. Thank you very much, Ms. Reveille. So the memo is very, very good, and I understood, I think, all of it. So do any members have any clarifying questions or anything they'd like Ms. Reveille to discuss about from either the memo or from the 2021 survey legislative compensation? Any members need any further information? All right, does anybody in the audience want to provide any comment to this issue? Anybody online? All right, so members, before you have a bill draft, it's strictly the 20 or 0231, and I'm not going to take any action on it. I think we'll walk through the next bill draft, and then we'll have them in contact. We'll have both of them together, and then we can decide what we want. I would just say that, if you just do the simple math, if you will, if you just added $250 to the quarterly allowance went from $750 to $1,000, that basically equates to $93,000, because you're adding $1,000 for 93 members per year. So is the consequence. So currently, our constituent allowance for 93 members would be, for the coming legislature, $279,000. $279,000. And for every $250 you add to it, it goes up another $93,000. Just numbers that I can understand. All right, so we have another bill draft. This bill draft is taken out of order. As I mentioned earlier, this is the 20230 bill draft. Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, Management Council tried to tackle the issue of legislators who serve particularly large districts and what the cost associated with that is and a way to compensate legislators for those costs. While that effort produced a bill draft, and I think it was even introduced, nothing passed the legislature to provide any additional compensation to those members. 23 LSO 230 Working Draft 0.4 is another attempt to do that, Mr. Chairman. It purports to increase constituent service allowance up to an additional $750 a quarter for legislators who serve districts that meet some criteria, and provides Management Council with the authority after each redistricting cycle to determine which districts and which legislators who serve in those districts would be eligible for this potential reimbursement for mileage and also lodging up to $750 a quarter. The baseline, Mr. Chairman, and I just picked these numbers, the subcommittees can decide whether they're correct or not. First is you have to serve in a district that is at least 2,000 square miles. When Management Council is deciding whether to authorize this reimbursement, I included a few other criteria for council to take into consideration. That's kind of starts at the bottom of page 3, the numbers of counties in the district, the number of incorporated municipalities in the district, school districts, whether the district includes a community college, the number of special districts in the district, and any other information council deems relevant when making a determination under this paragraph. Mr. Chairman, also included with this is a memo that gives you an idea of the district size for the 67th legislature, though I've included, just for reference, or LSO staff have included the current legislator who serves in that district. And also included within that memo are the counties, municipalities, and school districts within each district as well. And according to LSO IT staff Beth Hoopler, we can extract from our GIS information that we use for redistricting the special districts that make up each House and Senate district as well. That'll take us a little bit of work to do that. And that data would need to be cleaned up actually more extensively than I thought was necessary for the presentation at this meeting.
Thank you very much, Director. So for the members of the committee, it looks like over the majority of the Senate districts under the current configuration would be over, and I didn't do the percentage of the House districts, would be over the 2,000. The second part of the bill, which is bottom of page 3, top of page 4, about number of districts and all that, that was just an effort to try to get to, how many other taxing authorities and other entities these legislators may be representing, and try to acknowledge that as we approach this. I think probably the key thing about this is actually a reimbursement. The first $750 is not a reimbursement. That comes directly to you. The second one, the way I read it, is on page 2, line 16, is reimbursement. And so that means there would be, receipts, et cetera, provided to staff as is laid out further on. So members, do you have any questions about this bill draft that the director can answer? Any questions from the members of the committee? There's a deafening silence.
Mr.
question.
Speaker.
Please, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just say that on this particular issue, you certainly have people like myself that have an incredibly small district where $750, and to my knowledge, what I understood the constituent service allowance originally was drafted was to do mailings, and to reach out and have those discussions, right afterwards. And it's morphed a little bit, right? We've had the discussion now that it's people attending town council meetings or city council meetings. And, you look at Representative Paxton that has geographically the largest district in the entire country, that he has to cover, better part of 3/4 of the state to get to one end of his district to the other. And I think when we have an issue like that, I think that, in my opinion, I don't think there needs to be a reimbursement process. I think that it should be a pretty slam dunk case that if these people are working in these districts and they're attending these locations, in my opinion, I think that we should be basing it off of square mileage. Maybe we look at doing that, but it does beg the question of whether or not they're using it, right? And we have to start going down there. Is somebody just using this as money to offset the hotel costs that they're paying out of their pocket right now, or are they using this to take their constituents out to coffee and hear the issues that they're hearing? In my opinion, I think that if we were to move this bill forward for consideration, I would look at removing the reimbursement portion of this, and I would just make it a flat, additional $750 for those members that have over the 2,000 square miles. That would be my recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Further discussion? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess just a question for staff, because I'm wondering how much more time this would take them as far as calculating all of this and how cumbersome that is, or if there's a way to streamline it. I'm obviously in a fairly big district. I'm not really sure where I'm ready to go. I was pretty comfortable with the first two bills and kind of think we ought to see how those shake out and then have the broader discussion like Representative Brown said, because this is all a bigger issue. And sometimes I feel like by not tackling it all at once, we're doing a disadvantage to ourselves and to our colleagues when this is kind of it's a new committee that we put together and delved into this, but it's a pretty big issue, especially, for example, just as Representative Connolly was saying, doing a little bit of research, I had been on the phone with some representatives from Arizona. They actually have dedicated partisan staff in their state, yet on their survey, and I know that our staff did a little more work on that for us as well, but on their survey, they said none. They didn't have any support, but they just have it in a different way. And so other states do things in so many different ways. And so while I'm fairly comfortable with the first two bills, I don't know if I'm necessarily comfortable with the automatic escalator on the first one, but I think Management Council can take that up and look at that part. So I decided to vote that on, but I think we do need to have a broader discussion. So I'm probably, as far as I'm willing to go today, as far as I don't really want to piecemeal this together any more than what we already have. I'd like to see us, and I will probably ask staff to look into that tax exempt status, because I do think we should be receiving that, because we're double, it's the taxpayers ultimately that are paying for that, especially when we increase our per diem rates, when we're the ones that increase the lodging tax. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be paying those taxes, whatever kind of tax they be. So I think we should look into that, and I'd appreciate it if staff would draft up a bill for me on that, of how we might, maybe if Josh is still listening to us, and thank you, Josh. So those are just my thoughts for the day, and I won't take up any more of our committee time.
All right, so any further discussion on the 230 draft point 4? Representative Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too like the idea of having that broader discussion, but let's face it, we've been doing it for years, and the best we've gotten to is at this point, looking at it kind of piecemeal. So I really do hope that we kind of move these forward in order to continue to have that discussion and actually to have some relief. With this one here, I agree with Representative Brown regarding the let's just do it and not go through the kind of step-by-step analysis. What I'd like to see instead is, because anytime you have a cutoff point, there's going to be what happens if you're 1 or 2 miles below the 2000. And I think I saw that there is one house district that was at above 1900, right? So what I like to see instead of what we see right here is keep that 2000, but for someone less than, and have it be automatic, but for someone who is less than the 2000, then management council gets to make a determination. And just then in general, the thought that management council would make a determination based on what, 7 factors for anyone above 2000 and kind of balancing out school districts and counties, that's just too much. And I honestly think that calculus would become very complicated, and in all honesty, to say no to a particular request when somebody is over 2000 miles versus saying no to someone else. So again, I'd like to move this forward. I would like to see some substantial changes in it. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, further discussions on this bill draft, and then we'll take committee. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question, and this is probably more directly for staff. Maybe I'm thinking about this in a different manner, but is there a possibility that we can look at taking all of these bill drafts and creating one bill draft, excuse me, that would ultimately be passed to management council and brought to the body, as opposed to these individual bills that would just be a larger discussion on legislator compensation, and how that would go. I know we have a tough issue when it comes to single subject, but I think all of this wrangles underneath that umbrella of legislator compensation. And then at the end of the day, whatever we pass out of this committee and on to management council, I think it would fare better to have a larger discussion about this than individual discussions about, and exactly what we see here. Well, I like the first 2 portions, but I don't like that last one. And what I don't want to see us getting into, especially when we say, hey, an individual wants to mail his constituency once a month, his or her constituency once a month, and it becomes a franking privilege like what we have in DC, where, hey, I stay in contact with my constituents once a month and I mail out a letter to every single person once a month. I don't think that's what we want to get into. And I don't think we want to have a situation where that's where we have an abuse of the privilege. And I don't think our constituents want to see that. So, but back to my main question, if Matt might have a more direct answer for me on whether or not we can combine all these bill drafts into one bill once we have our recommendations out of this committee.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, you certainly can, and actually I split out these topics for ease for the subcommittee to not have to tackle all of them in one draft. It's easier to be able to discuss individual topics in each bill draft rather than 5 topics in one draft. But I would caution that the one caveat to that is your salary. That has a different effective date and that won't go into effect for 4 years. I don't think it's necessary to put it out for that long, but you certainly have to put it out until the start of the 68th legislature.
Okay, thank you. So I think that for our purposes, of the practical purposes, working through the different issues, I think we'll just march on as we are. And then as management council takes these bills up and decides to move anything forward, they can make the decision whether to combine them into a sponsored bill that would be containing multiple subjects. So thank you for that question. Further discussion from the committee. Ms. Talbot, you have something? Representative Sweeney, so good to hear from you. Welcome. We have a colleague comment or two. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. So thanks for having this discussion. Very good comments, I thought, this morning. I'll come at this from a little different angle. I think we've got to do something to keep and get younger folks to run. And as an example for myself, this is something I'm not even remotely coming close to breaking even on. And that's not why I got in it, but it will limit if we don't address some of these things. And part of this discussion on some of the action we took in the last session or the session before on pay increases with county attorneys and different elected positions. I mean, that became campaign rhetoric. And so it's going to be difficult to get, for management council or anybody, to get anything through with this regard. But I think you've got to try on a broad scope. Otherwise, you're just going to limit the pool of folks that are going to be able to run for these positions, and really knocking people out that just don't have the ability. They've got families, they've got businesses, they may work for somebody that's not very understanding. Representative Brown has made several good points, and I worry about that. So I think the more that you're able to take on and put in front of the body, I think is good. And I would encourage moving several of these through, whether it's the constituent allowance makes sense, the additional legislator mileage can make sense. A lot of these, if they're set up properly, strictly would be a reimbursement tool, as I read the proposed language. But I'd encourage the group. Minority Floor Leader made an excellent point. Before my time in the legislature, which has been fairly recent, this has been looked at, and we keep kicking the can down the road. Prices are escalating. It's becoming more and more expensive, whether it's daycare, whether it's groceries, whatever. And we have to be realistic about it for the future of the legislature, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for talking about our staff. I truly believe if we don't wake up, we're going to continue to lose good people, whether it's session staff. What do they want to put themselves through all of this for, and the rhetoric? So, they enjoy doing it, the ones that session staff. So anything we can do for them, I think we should do. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I ran.
Always good to see you and hear from you, Representative Sweeney. Thank you. Any members have any questions for Representative Sweeney? Anyone else online? Anyone else online? All right, anyone in the room want to comment to either of these bill drafts? Comment to either of these bill drafts. Director Obrecht, you want to, anything else before the committee takes any actions? All right. All right, committee, what's your pleasure? We have two bill drafts before us, 231 and 230. The first one is just the change in the service allowance amount. The second one is a area associated reimbursement potential. Mr. Co-Chairman.
As soon as I find my button.
Mr.
Thank you,
Co-Chairman.
Chairman. I would propose, and I would move that we, let's see, I got to get the right numbers here, that we forward 30, the increase 31. Is that correct?
200, yeah, 231.
231. We move that one forward, and we let the other one set aside, but we go ahead and move 31 forward and propose and I would propose that in the amendments, increasing it to 200, or increasing by 250 up to 1,000. And then we allow management council to work with large districts and further issues, but this way we put it on their agenda. This way we move it forward and give management council something to work with. So that would be my move, is to push 31 forward, the increase of the amount.
All right, so just to be clarified, I heard a second from Representative Brown, I believe. Is that accurate, Representative Brown or Guru, or Senator Guru?
Brown.
Brown, thank you. So I heard a second, but I just want to clarify, the motion was for draft 231, which just has the amount, and the amount change is adding $250, which makes the new language be $1,000. $1,000. Discussion on that. Discussion on that. Discussion on the motion. And to be, just so all folks are aware that this would begin July 1st, 2023. So it would begin in the second half of, the first half of the second year of the biennium. Further discussion. Further discussion. All right, since this is a motion on a bill draft to go forward, I'm just going to ask for a roll call vote.
Senator Gru,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
No,
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly,
aye.
Co-Chairman Baldwin, Co-Chairman Barlow. 5 ayes, 1 no.
All right, that will be advanced. Thank you very much. Any further action on Bill 31? Or excuse me, 30, 230, excuse me, 230. Further action from the committee? Further action, Madam Minority Floor Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to 30 for forwarding to Management Council.
Okay, do I have a second?
Oh,
Did Senator Guru seconds it? Thank you. Discussion on the draft amendments. I didn't ask for amendments. I guess it came with an amendment. But amendments on the 230 bill draft, 230 bill draft. Amendments on the draft. Amendments on the draft. Representative Conley.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I won't make an amendment now, but would like to when we get to full Management Council, if it does pass, in order to think a little bit more about that 2,000-mile threshold and what to do for representatives that are a little below it. But I'd like to just pass it along right now to have that more thorough discussion.
Okay, further discussion or amendments in the bill? Representative Brown, amendments or discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have a little bit of concern passing this one forward as is, as a recommendation. I think this subcommittee was tasked to figure out what we need to look at. And frankly, I I would not support this bill as it is going forward to management council. I think that this bill has a very good intent, but I think there's a lot of issues here that I see, and I don't know that I want to task management council with trying to come up with all the amendments to fix it. And coming up with the amendments on this, I would offer up an amendment that would basically say if you live up over the 2,000 square miles, you're just guaranteed the 750 and just get that. I don't want to task management council and or staff to go through all the processes of determining, how many counties are in the district, how many incorporated municipalities and school districts. I don't think we want to go down that road, in my opinion. I think this is an either or. And so I guess I'll make the motion, and it's more of a conceptual. So I apologize, Matt, but basically I'll make the motion that this would be an additional $750 reimburse or $750 to those who have a total square mileage of more than 2,000, and then basically strip the rest of the language. I can't think of a way on the fly here how to do that. So that would be my motion.
All right, I think that's actually understandable. So there, for anybody that goes over the 2,000 square miles, any district that's over the 2,000 square miles, there'd be an additional $750 worth of allowance, constituent allowance. Now, to be clear, the 750 is out of this bill draft. We just amended our previous bill draft to go to 1,000, but management council can sort that out if they want it, if they move this forward. So there is a motion, an amendment. Any further amendments?
Mr. Chair,
So let's vote on that amendment.
Mr. Chair. Oops.
Go ahead, please. Comments on the amendment.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so I would second it, but I honestly think it's pretty simple. On page 2, line 16, you change the may to shall, finish up that sentence and then delete the rest. And that's all it would be.
Thank you. There's a second, and any further discussion on this motion to amend the bill draft, which decreased the amount of the bill draft by a page and a half or 2. Thank you. Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye, or show me your hands. Are you voting? So I see 3 hands on the screen, 3 hands in the, and no, 3 hands, 4 hands, 1 in the audience and 1 in the room. So that motion passes. So the bill is now amended. We can basically get rid of page 3 and page 4, except for section 2. Further discussion on the bill, further amendments. Further discussion on the bill, further amendments. Just to be clear, the amended bill now has a second $750 for legislators who represent districts that are greater than 2,000 square miles. It is a shall, and I think actually we need to change the reimbursement language too, because it is no longer reimbursement. It is now just an amount, an allowance. All right. Further, any discussion from any further amendments? Discussion? Director Obrecht?
Mr. Chairman, and just so the subcommittee is aware, it is likely that additional constituent service allowance would be considered compensation in the constitutional sense. So that's why the effective date is with the start of the 68th legislature.
Thank you. Further discussion, anything else from the committee?
Question.
All right, we're voting on sponsoring or forwarding draft 230 on to Management Council as amended. Please call the roll.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
No.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Baldwin,
No.
Co-Chairman Barlow.
No. The motion, the bill is not forwarded on a tied vote. All right, anything further on those two bills? Right. Now we'll go back to our legislative salary. Number 4 is legislative salary is 229. Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, 23 LSO 229, working draft 0.2 increases legislator salary from $150 a day to $230 per day as of January 12th, 2027. So, Mr. Chairman, that would be with the start of the 69th legislature. So all current members would have to stand for re-election before receiving this increased salary.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for the director on the bill draft? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious where, and I maybe didn't see it, but where the 230 came from, I can't remember, and I didn't see it in any of my packet that I saw. So just a quick clarification on that.
Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, this number was presented to the committee in the last meeting as what would be a commensurate increase to legislator compensation, legislator salary, if it had kept pace with the increase to state employee salary from the last time legislator salary was increased in 2005. And that increase would be up to 230. And I think that's roughly a 42% increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the director on the bill draft? Questions for the director on the bill draft? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Matt, you just said a 42% increase. So a 42% increase from now until the 68th legislature, that's how you're pegging that out? Or just in comparison to what we're making today to what this would take us to if it were enacted?
Director Obrecht, if you'd like to respond.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, Senator, so that would be that 42%, roughly 42%, is what state employees, the average state employee received in salary increase from 2005 through 2022. But it doesn't take into account a reduction in state employee take-home from increased employee and retirement contributions, and also increased insurance premium costs. And that number, budget fiscal worked out to me, if we took that into consideration, that would reduce that 42% by about 8%. So it would reduce this number if we use that factor to increase legislator compensation to about $212 a day.
The other thing that this does, because this comes to current date and the effective, this doesn't actually take effect for 4 more years, is it does not take into account that as either. Thank you. Further follow-up, Senator Grew?
Well, it's just one of those numbers, depending on how you feel about it, it's like, I always close my eyes and just look at the headline, legislators raise their pay 42% in an 11th hour move on a televised meeting that was seen by no one. You can just play that one out for yourself. And I'm sure some will. So yeah, let's vote. I'm ready. Go ahead. I got it. Thanks.
All right, well, it's 10 o'clock, not 11, and so we're way ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Further discussion or questions for the director on the bill draft? Further discussion or further questions? Further questions? All right, public comment? Is there anybody online? Representative Yin, please.
Good morning, Mr.
morning.
Chair and Subcommittee. I did want to make some comment on this. It's not particularly on the number. However, I think it actually has to do with how do we justify this to the public. And I think we all understand as legislators, the longer that we don't change this number, the worse it's going to be every year that passes by where it doesn't make a change. But we also understand, I think, that the time commitment, as well as what Representative Sweeney said on ensuring that we have people who are willing to step up to be legislators themselves in the future once all of us are gone. I've done a little bit of research. There are 22 states that actually have an independent commission that oversees legislative compensation. And so they take into account, what does it mean to ensure that people step up to the job? What does it mean in comparison to similar states? And what does it mean to ensure that the time spent as a legislator makes sense for the compensation that comes from that? And then usually that commission is appointed by members of, they're appointed members by the governor and the House and the Senate. And then they can provide an external justification that the public can understand. It's not the legislators raising their salary, it's the legislators approving what an external entity has said the salary and compensation should be for the legislature. I think we all understand what it sounds like when someone raises their own salary. And I do think that having that additional justification from an external entity would really make the case to the public. I've thought about drafting an amendment to the current bill to do this, but I don't have draft language in place for that right now. I would be interested in doing something similar to what Alaska does. So they have a 5-member commission, 3 members appointed by the governor, 1 by the House, 1 by the Senate, just to take a look every couple of years at what the salary looks like, whether it's even matched inflationary adjustment, which it hasn't clearly, and then make that recommendation as an advisory body only to the legislature, so the legislature can make a final decision on what that looks like. So that's my suggestion. I might bring an amendment to Management Council if the current bill moves forward, but I don't have any draft language at this time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Representative Yin. Anything else from anybody in the room want to comment to this bill draft? Anybody else online, Katie? Right. All right, further discussion by the committee. Any amendments? Any amendments? Page 1, page 2. Discussion by the committee. Discussion by the committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess there's a whole bunch of, discussions here to be had, and I'm kind of surprised we're not having a larger discussion here. But I guess at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, if you're beholden to the taxpayers of this state, it's going to look tough no matter what you're doing if you give yourself a raise. Our congressional people, they do it and they get crucified every single time they do it as well. But at the end of the day, I think it's a critical point, and it goes back to my original discussion here, to determine what are we asking of our legislators and what's our time worth as a legislator. I take time off and I go to work for the legislature, and I have to push aside my salary when I'm not at work or take paid time off. And so I have a salary that bases me over there. And depending upon the day, if we're sitting in legislative session, we can pull anywhere from an 8-hour day all the way to I've been there for almost 18 hours. But I get the same amount of money. And so that per hour difference starts to become a difference. And so when I think about that, I think about what do we want representing in our legislative body. And that is, I want a mixture of everybody. I want a mixture of everything that's out there in our state. I want the person that works for the railroad. I want the person that works in the hospital. I want the person that's a retired rancher. I want the person that's a current rancher. And the only way to do that is to have a fair and equitable salary where somebody steps away from what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and they can afford to do it. And there's currently a situation right now where you have the $150 a day, where if you have that plus your per diem, and then if you can find a place to stay here for a reasonable rate during session, you're going to do all right for those periods of time. But at the end of the day, when you settle everything else out, you're not getting health insurance. We're not, and we'll tackle that here in a second as well. But there's a lot of costs associated with being a legislator. And I think we all understand that as we put our name out there. And I think the majority of people who are willing to do that understand that. But as Representative Yin pointed out, there's going to be a public-facing discussion that we all have to have. And I think that public-facing discussion comes to what I just discussed at the beginning of this meeting is, what do we ultimately want from our legislators? And do we want this to be a professional legislature? I don't think we do. So I think it's one of two things, that we either start pulling back the amount of work that we're doing, which is going to be very tough to do, or we start compensating our legislators equitably for what their time is worth. And the only way to do that and to make sure that we have quality candidates that are willing to put their name on the public in the public eye is to compensate them correctly. So I don't necessarily think $230 a day is a huge amount of money. When you consider it could be a 10, 12-hour day, and you're going to get that same amount of money regardless. So I'll support this bill. I do think it's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I think there's a discussion that needs to be had on what is a legislator worth and what do we want to attract to fill these seats on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill draft. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is a broader discussion, and we've already advanced a bill, I think, that would bump us up with our per diem and our salary to about $300 a day, which that is our expenses and being away. And many of us do run businesses and do all of that. But I don't know that I think you raise a great point, Representative Brown, as what kind of legislature do we want to be? And maybe there should be some balancing on both sides of it, our work level and on our increase. But I don't think it has to be all or nothing. I think we could make adjustments on both sides of that equation and not take it as an all or nothing proposition. And so I look forward to keeping this discussion moving forward. And I think we've had some productive thoughts shared today that we'll all be thinking about and that Management Council will be too. So thanks for the good discussion.
All right, further discussion on the bill draft. Further discussion, Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when I said that about the 42%, I like to say, I know you can couch this in 1,000 different ways. The way I look at it is that between 2005 and 2027, we're going to give ourselves a less than $100 increase in pay per day. No one in the working world that I know of is doing that or anywhere near that, except in slave labor camps in other countries. So I don't really see it as a big problem. But like I say, I know how some will couch it for political purposes. I think it is part of I thought the reason why this group was formed was to have that broader discussion. And so that's why I'm trying to advance all of these, even though the last one I didn't agree with as much. I mean, I'm in one of those larger districts, but I'm only one town, one school district, and more moose, buffalo, and elk than anything else. And so I didn't really, I'm good to go. But I also know I too am very incumbently, more importantly, it's mentioned a lot by my significant other about the value of my time. And she puts a pretty high value on it. I don't as much. But but I think that it's worth a larger discussion about who we get in the legislature and who we get to run. And that's why I think putting forward these small increases is worth doing. And I think the next one is the big one personally, that could really be a game changer for allowing more people the ability to serve, the ability to be able to make that calculation that my wife can't make, that makes it worth it. So, and it is a personal thing, I know, but I think it is. I think we're having the discussion right now, although not as wordy as sometimes, but yeah, I think we're having it. So yeah, on and for. Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion? Yes, Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too say let's move this forward. The dollar figure, it makes sense. Any dollar figure that we would put in there would make sense for that moment. But I'm also interested in really talking about, to further the discussion that Representative Brown wants us to have, the suggestion by Representative Yin to have an independent commission. Because let's face it, if we haven't raised salary, and I think Matt said since 2005, that we don't want another legislative body to wait 17 years, right? Let's institute an independent commission to make a recommendation that's outside of the body itself. But let's do both of those. So I would encourage us to move this along and to have that further discussion. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion. All right. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, move the bill.
I have Conley moving the bill, and I think Brown seconding it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amendments to the bill. Amendments to the bill. First of all, was there any additional public comment in the room, online? Okay. Okay, Representative Sweet, we did hear from him. Thank you. Amendments page 1, amendments page 2. Amendments page 1, amendments page 2. Discussion on the bill. Co-Chairman Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here. It's a little noisy here in the room, but that's okay. Construction moves forward. I would propose an amendment, and I don't know exactly, perhaps the director could help us with the placement of the amendment, that we make a provision of this bill, if it passes, to form a 5-person commission to independent from the legislature every 2 years to determine what would be appropriate for an increase in the legislative salary. I don't know if anybody has a suggestion on wording on that, but to that effect, I would like that to happen.
Okay, so there's a motion for a, I guess we'll call it a conceptual amendment to include maybe in a section 2 that would have a commission being formed to evaluate this issue and making recommendation to the legislature. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second from Senator Guru. So Baldwin and Guru. Director Obrecht, we're working the bill. Can you give us some thoughts? Because that's something you can maybe put together and give us some suggestions from another state. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it certainly is. And if it's the will of the subcommittee, I'll use Representative Yin's suggestion of a 5-member committee based on the Alaska model with 3 appointed by the governor, 1 by the speaker, and 1 by the president to meet. And I think it's important to always remember that this committee or this commission would be making recommendations to one legislature for the salary for the next legislature.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that. Does anybody have any comments on what the director is suggesting as the baseline?
And
go ahead, Director.
And Mr. Chairman, maybe just for the subcommittee to consider, and this is a little bit beyond your charge, but, and Mr. Chairman, that's maybe some license, but statutory salaries are difficult not just for legislators. They're difficult for judges. They're difficult for the 5 statewide elected officials, for county officials who are also tied to statutory salaries. They are tough to change. Maybe the subcommittee would want to consider some broader work for this sort of commission beyond just legislator salaries into the judicial branch and county officials and the elected officials or anyone else who might have a statutory salary as an elected official.
Senator Baldwin, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, and I think that's agreeable with me, and I would propose that we make that adjustment as well. That would make that applicable to those.
Okay, so
folks
we're
as well.
expanding our role a little bit, but we're here today and we're in charge. So I think it was Senator Guru that had the second, and is that acceptable as a bit of an expansion on the discussion? And obviously, folks, this is just to would be advanced to the Management Council for their consideration. One thing I guess I want some direction from the committee is whether, I don't think we probably have enough time to have another meeting for this. So what I'd like to do is have, when this is drafted up, the director just, if this passes, the director just pass that out to the committee, make comments back to the committee, and then we'll go through there and not have another meeting to take up a final version. We're just making a recommendation to Management Council, so unless there's objection to that, we'll proceed in that manner. All right, so we have now an amendment. Any further amendments to the bill? Further amendments to the bill?
Do you vote on that amendment?
Let's vote on the amendment. And for the commission addition, all those in favor, I'll just do by show of hands. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? All right. The amendment has been adopted. 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Back on the bill. Any further amendments to the bill? Further amendments to the bill? Seeing none. So members, we're going to vote on advancing an amended, and the amendment will be provided in time, of 229 as a recommendation for a consideration by Management Council. Please call the roll.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
No.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Baldwin,
No.
Co-Chairman Barlow.
Aye. So that is advanced. 4 in favor, 2 opposed. Thank you very much. Well, welcome. Chairman Zwanitzer is in the house, and our chief and clerk and her able deputy are leaving. Have a great day. Thank you, ladies. All right, so we're on our final draft, I believe. And just before we do this, is there any other business that the committee needs to take up before we depart? I'm looking at Ms. Cameraman and I'm looking at the director. Anything else that needs to be taken up? All right. Director, if you'd walk us through LSO 227, please.
Mr. Chairman, LSO draft 227, working draft 0.1 is based on a bill that was introduced in the 2013 session by former Representative Dave Zwanitzer and potentially Representative Zwanitzer again, we'll see. But it simply allows legislators to participate in the state employee group health insurance program in the same manner that the current state employees, including legislative and judicial branch employees, participate in that plan. To walk through this draft quickly, Mr. Chairman, on page 2 it provides for the election of a member after their election to office and after they're swearing in to elect to be covered and to participate in the EGI plan. It also allows for members who have specified life events such as a new dependent to enroll at other times or enroll during open enrollment periods like state employees can. It allows a legislator's dependents to also be covered under EGI. Mr. Chairman, it also on page 3 allows for members of the legislature to participate in any of the flexible benefit healthcare allowed under Internal Revenue Service Code, Section 125. These are also referred to as cafeteria plans. Mr. Chairman, on page 5 and through the end of the bill is simply a conforming amendments to allow the legislature to participate in the EGI plan. Yesterday, Mr. Chairman, we sent out 2 memos on what the potential cost of legislators participating in EGI would be based on some different scenarios, and also provided what the cost would be to legislators if legislators picked up all of the costs of their insurance, unlike state employees who have the state picks up a substantial share of an employee's insurance. That share changes based on what plan the member enrolls in.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions for the director on the bill draft? Representative Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director, on page 7, lines 9 through 15, there's a definition of member of the legislature, and it has someone needing to be 2 years after being sworn in. Can you explain that one? I wasn't sure what that was about.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, I think that is only to provide for the to ensure that a member is in the legislature for the prerequisite amount of time, but I don't think it's necessary, Representative Conley, to your point, to include that date. And I think member coverage could start immediately upon their first term.
So I think thank you, Director. I think what we're trying to get to is not voting on your own potential salary, but in this case, we could have the discussion whether that's necessary or not. I had the same question about that 2-year delay because it seemed like everybody would get staggered then. And anyway. All right, further questions for the director? Further questions for the director? So I guess I have a, and this is, I know this bill was drafted on one that was previously, maybe it is the identical bill, it was one that's previously drafted. Director, is this the same bill or has this been modified?
Mr. Chairman, the only modification was the specification that the legislator could participate in those flexible benefit plans. And I'm not even sure that's necessary. I just wanted to specify that in the bill draft. Other than that, it's all based on the 2013 bill.
All right, thank you. So I guess my question is, instead of bringing in legislators as a new category for EGI to consider, we already have a category called official in statute. We have employees and officials. And under officials, the definition of official in Title 29, it is any elected or appointed state official who receives compensation, which legislators certainly do, other than expenses, which we do, we get expenses also, except for members of the legislature. And so my question is, would it be a simpler bill draft to just strike the except for members of the legislature from that definition? And then by virtue of that, legislatures are now officials of the state and they fall under what EGR already has in place without new statutory guidance. Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, that would absolutely be another option on how to draft this bill. And when I thought about when considering how to tackle this for the committee, I do think there would need to be some non-codified direction in that bill to EGI on allowing the first members to enroll and then allowing that enrollment period once members take office. But to your point, it is the same when any elected official would take office, that they'd be allowed. It's just like when you start your employment with the state.
Thank you, Director. And to that point, the official language, there is basically some of the very same language that is in Section 1 in current statute under officials, for the officials. So, and then they have rulemaking authority as well under that as also. So I guess that was my thing, is as a matter of simplicity, if the committee wants to advance this, we could simply change the definition of official and then make one other adjustment, which is a kind of a wonky adjustment, but we don't need to get into definitions of member of legislature. We don't need to add all the other language that's in there. So further, any other discussion from the committee? Questions for the committee for the director? Questions for the committee for the director? Seeing nothing from the committee. All right, anybody online wanting to speak to this? No? Anybody in the room wanting to speak to this? Chairman Zwanitzer, did you want to testify to this? And this is, for the listening public, this is Chairman Dan Zwanitzer, not former Chairman Dave Zwanitzer, and potentially nominee Dave Zwanitzer. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senator Baldwin, and members of the committee online. Just wanted to be here for the discussion. As many of you know, I have served 18 years now. Many of you may not know 10 years of that I served without health insurance altogether. 3 years I had the opportunity to go on COBRA, because when you work in the legislature, you are here full time, basically February or March. You need to hit that 130 hours a month of working. And so those 3 years going on COBRA cost more than my legislative salary. So I chose to go without health insurance during session. And these are years before we had workers' comp. That's just, I think, a 2-year advent. We've had workers' compensation in case we get injured in the body. And so it was ironic. I was the chairman of the insurance committee without having health insurance myself. Because quite frankly, if you're not married, you can't go on your spouse's insurance plan, which I do now, to be able to have health insurance for my family and my children. But before then, I think many people just go without because it's almost impossible. Your employer will not cover your health insurance while you're here that full time for those 2 months. And then many employers have difficulty if you are leaving employment to be here full time. You're not in that employee period. And so you're basically losing your health insurance and asking your employer to go back on health insurance with them. And so it's just difficult all the way around to maintain health insurance. If you're not married, you can't be on your spouse's plan, or you're not privately insured. I know many members of our legislature are. So whether this is a very large step, and I understand that, but I do believe there needs to be some step, whether that's covering COBRA, covering health insurance premiums for the months where you're in legislature that prevent you from holding full-time employment anywhere else. I did have 2 years where I basically had to meet my 80 hours a month rule, and so I worked both days on the weekends and nights and some mornings. So before I was coming to legislature, I was still holding down a 20-hour-a-week job to keep my health insurance, plus being a full-time legislator. And that impacted my performance during those years, certainly. So I do think something needs to be done. I do think it is almost impossible to serve in this legislature unless you have a spouse or private insurance, which is, I think both of you know, is probably over $20,000 a year in the private market to insure yourselves or your family. So I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I do think it is preventing, and maybe the strongest prevention of people being able to serve in the legislature for losing their health insurance. And I can think of 3 legislators in my tenure that we specifically said they were leaving the legislature and they ran for county commissioner because they had health insurance as county commissioners, which we couldn't offer them as legislators. So we were losing some bright talent from people who stepped away and do run for those offices because they get insurance benefits. So wanted to share that with the committee today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyone else in the room or online? Nobody online? So Director, I do have one more question on the bill draft, and this is on the top of page 5. And this talks about the retiree component and maintaining coverage afterwards. And there seems to be, when I look at the definition of retiree from in Title IX under this particular section, it has to be someone that's also eligible under the retirement system. So this would actually be a carve out for legislators, because most legislators, I would argue, are probably not retirees. So I guess I need to have a little better understanding how this, what the implications of this are. Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great point, and something that I should have mentioned earlier. The employee or the legislators who are no longer serving would have the opportunity to purchase retiree insurance benefits at the same rates that are offered to state employee retirees. And this is a specific carve out, because you're right. Legislators can participate in the 457 account, but cannot participate in the state pension fund, not solely by their status as being a legislator.
Okay, so this again goes back to the definition thing. If we look at official and then we look at retiree under definition, it says both someone who has terminated their working career as an employee, so there is not even an official or a legislator included in that right now, and who is eligible to receive retirement benefit. So I guess my question is there an obligation, is there a contribution, employer or legislative contribution, that would be required for this retirement component to the system, not to the beneficiary, but to the system? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the language of the bill draft just says that former members shall be treated as retirees for purposes of retiree health insurance. So I think it presupposes that, you know, whether you're a 35-year-old who is still actively working, that you just be treated as a retiree for purposes of receiving retiree benefits, or retiree health insurance coverage, excuse me.
Okay, thank you. All right. Committee, any further questions on the bill draft? Further questions on the bill draft? I see no other public comment. All right, committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Guru,
Second.
seconded by Representative Brown. Amendments on the bill. Amendments page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Chairman.
Representative Conley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 7, delete lines 9 through 15.
Page 7 deletes lines 9 through 15. Representative Conley, we may be looking at a different version than you. So I'm looking at 0.1 version of 227. So page 7, would you repeat what you want to delete?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's what I'm looking at. I'm deleting the definition of member of the legislature that puts out eligibility for 2 years.
Okay, so on our draft, it is lines I think it's just lines 3, and it goes from as through after. Or through years. Matt, would you just try to line out where we need to get rid of the 2-year issue?
You bet. Mr. Chairman, and Representative Conley, yeah, maybe the better way to handle this is in the definition, member of the legislature means a duly elected or appointed member of the Wyoming Senate or House of Representatives as of the date. And then if you want to strike, which is 2 years after the member is first sworn into office, and have it read after the date of which the member is first sworn into office.
Mr. Chairman, that sounds great.
All right, so there's an amendment to strike basically the two-year wait. Conceptually, is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Second, Guru. Conley, Guru. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Back on the bill. Further amendments to the bill? Further amendments to the bill. So members, I'm going to vote in favor of this bill, but I'm going to have an alternate bill that basically makes legislators an official and eliminates much of this. It's too much to go through right now, I think. I mean, conceptually, I think you understand what I'm trying to get to, is not just add more language for something I think we can do within current statute. So conceptually, I'm in agreement with the bill, but I think there is another potential way to do that, and I'll work with the director to have an alternative draft. Director, does that seem reasonable approach?
It does, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, further discussion on the bill? Further discussion on the bill? Discussion, Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And whichever way it goes with your conceptual thing, I think makes a lot of sense. But I'm in favor of the idea. Back when I was on Management Council, we took this up a couple of years ago and had the same discussion. To me, it's fairly simple. And we've talked about it all day, about a citizen legislature. This, and I think that Chairman Swanitzer brought it into focus quite clearly, this helps us remain a citizen legislature. And also helps us maybe get to a day when a citizen legislature that maybe is closer to a snapshot of Wyoming. I mean, we've got the old part down. I mean, I'm holding down that end pretty good, but I think that maybe a more broad snapshot that includes other folks that currently are not and cannot serve. And that, like I said, I think this is a serious impediment to that. And so I will be voting in favor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill. Further discussion on advancing this bill to Management Council for their consideration. Further discussion from the committee. Further discussion, seeing none. Please call the roll on advancing a recommendation of this bill to Management Council.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
No.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Baldwin. Co-Chairman Barlow.
Aye. So the bill is recommended for advancement to Management Council. And as I noted to the committee, I will work with Director Obrecht to see if we can't come with maybe another version that leverages the definition of official in statute. All right, is there any further business before the committee? Committee, anything? Yes, Representative Conley?
Mr. Chairman, it's not business, but I think we're done now. And I sent a message. I'd just like to mention that I'd like to bring up something when we go to Management Council with the recommendations of the subcommittee. When thinking about what we covered and what we didn't, one of the things that occurred to me is that there's an exception for appropriations in terms of preparation salary. And I know there's a couple people on approps here and that they're very glad to do the work. But when we're kind of just thinking kind of comprehensively about elements that we might need to change, I would like to have a discussion about the exclusion of members of appropriations getting preparation salary. And so I'd like to bring that up or have that on the agenda for the full Management Council meeting.
Actually, I think because we do have two of our Senate colleagues are on Appropriations Committee, let's just maybe get some feedback from them on that topic as in the broadest terms, so that when myself and Representative Connolly go to Management Council, I think we're the two members that serve on this committee. When we go, we have have at least fleshed it out within this committee a little bit. So Senator Steinmetz, do you have any thoughts on the exclusion that you do not receive and none of your colleagues on appropriations receive that preparatory salary for your management council, or excuse me, for your appropriations work. Would you like to make any comment?
Mr. Chairman, no, I think that we're compensated just fine for the work we do. We knew we signed up for a pretty heavy workload, and so I don't have any comments on it at this time. Thank you.
I think, so to be clear, for every other committee assignment, for each day, or for each meeting, there's a half day worth of preparation time per member, except for Appropriations Committee. And they are not receiving that. Ms. Cameraman, is that accurate? She's nodding her head vertically, so that means yes, for those that can't see Ms. Cameraman. And that doesn't have to do with the budget hearings. That has to do with any meeting that they have during the interim. Or is it just for the budget?
Just budget hearings.
Okay, just for budget hearings. Okay, thank you. Senator Grew, would you like to make any comment to the identified concern that Madam Minority Floor Leader has brought forth?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually felt the way my good friend Senator Steinmetz felt about it. When the schedule for budget the first few years, and from what I was told, was kind of always pretty much the same, is that you took a 2-week period there in December, and you just kind of met during those 2 weeks. And I can't remember if we got paid for that weekend that we were off or not. But the bottom line to me is it seemed like that we were there and it was adequate for what we were doing over the time. However, in the last couple of years, last year and now again this year, that's changing a bit because of a scheduling conflict with some of the members and some other meetings that occur. Last year, we went a week and then we were off a few days and we went back, and that made it really difficult. And so I guess I never had a problem with it before, but when those extra added costs came in at going and coming, and then it made some sense. So I guess my point would be, I'd like to see us really try to get back to the schedule that we used to have, and then it wouldn't be as much of an issue to me. But if we're going to start and stop and go back because of other commitments, then I think it's maybe worth a discussion. So I know that's kind of maybe something that we can't do anything about, but it just seemed like it kind of ruined the flow for me as going through it. But that was my take on it. But thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Further discussions? So go ahead, Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And let me just kind of back up and say why I thought about this. Honestly, I'm probably thinking about budget hearings coming up, and I did serve on appropriations. And I'll be honest with you, I knew that the two members of this subcommittee would say, "Oh, no, we're fine," because as Senator Simon said, we signed up for this and we knew about it. But I think our job is, as a subcommittee, is to think about legislators and going forward. And as Representative Brown kind of keeps on reminding us, we need to be thinking about this comprehensively. And to be honest, thinking about it like that, it's an incredible heavy lift. And we all know that, to serve on appropriations. And I am confident that all of the members, including the two here, spend massive amount of time outside of the budget hearings themselves, preparing for those budget hearings. And most likely, often more than the half day that is allocated for other committees. And I think that you should be fairly compensated. And that you, meaning not the two of you, but the you that serve on appropriations going forward, right? Let's face it, there's elections coming up. You may or may not win, and you may or may not be appointed by your presiding officers to serve on there. So it's honestly thinking about the future and service on the Appropriations Committee and fair compensation. And so I do think that exclusion makes it more difficult and perhaps even unfair right, in comparison to some other service, that exclusion exists. So that's why I'd like for us to talk about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify for everybody that when we're talking about this subject, this is actually a management council policy that guides this. This is not a statutory issue. This is a management council policy that has provided this prohibition, if you will. Director Obrecht, is that correct? And is there any others that stand out in your mind?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And, I would say that the historically, new members of JAC had been treated like other new members of committee of any other committee when they were appointed. They weren't provided salary. It just per diem and mileage to attend those new meetings which you were appointed to. But Management Council recognized that service on JAC, and especially new members hearing the budget hearings, were important, and have for the last 3 or 4 biennium approved salary for new members who aren't yet on JAC but will be appointed to JAC in the next legislature to attend the budget hearings in the December prior. So I also don't know if this makes any sense anymore on the no prep time salary for appropriations members.
Thank you. So if we'll make a note on this issue as a topic that we'll take to the president, who is the chairman of Management Council, and ask him to include it on the agenda. So thank you for that. Anything else from the committee? Anything else from the committee? Anything else from the committee? Director, anything else? Representative, let's get the director, and then we'll go to any other public comment. Director, anything that you have for us?
No, Mr. Chairman, nothing, just to say that these bills will be presented at the Management Council's meeting on October 24th, the first time, and that meeting will be here in the upstairs in the historic Supreme Court room.
Thank you very much. And then we had any final public comment? Representative Yin, colleague, comment? Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I only wanted to say it's a little outside of the scope of the committee, but I wanted to congratulate Representative Brown on being announced to win the Council of State Governments 20 Under 40 Leadership Award. And so that's literally only 20 people in the entire country who are elected and appointed officials across the country who exemplify strong leadership skills, demonstrate a true commitment to serving the citizens of their state and territory. And so he will be awarded at the CSG National event. And so I'm very excited to congratulate him in a public meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well done, Representative Brown. I guess that doesn't surprise me you got the award. It surprises me that you're under 40. But congratulations on the award.
I
thought being in the legislature aged you faster than me, faster than normal time. So congratulations. I think that is a trip that's coming up in December, and I think it's to the island state of Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken. So please enjoy that time, and congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
Anything further for the good of the order? Anything further for the good of the order? With that, the subcommittee, I thank you for your service on the subcommittee. I do not see a need for us to reconvene. And so this will be our final meeting. As the director noted, these bills will be presented, and we will make note of the bill that did not advance to the Management Council. I'll certainly make note. And if any of you would like to be a part of the presentation to Management Council, you are more than welcome to join the director and I as we present those. So, and my co-chairman as well. So, seeing no further business, I thank you, and we are adjourned.
Great job, committee.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.